Welcome to this exclusive K2 Your Voice, Your Vote digital forum. With the biggest change in the history of Portland city government coming in January, the old city council of 4 commissioners and 1 mayor will be long gone. In its place, 12 new Portland city councilors. Voters will pick 3 councilors from 4 new districts. Dozens have applied for the jobs. Today we'll hear from Portland City Council candidates from District 1, which includes parts of Northeast Portland and all the easternmost part of the city, from 82nd Avenue to the city boundaries.
When they pull up on a bus stop, there's people smoking that black, that blue, whatever, right there in public, and it's a no-no. What kind of message does that give our kids, man?
How are you going to get rid of the homeless or fix the problem? It's not working, whatever you're doing now, and it hasn't.
The challenges voters say candidates need to address. Your vote will have a huge impact on Portland's future. This live digital forum with candidates from District 1 starts right now.
From K2 and Willamette University, this is Your Voice, Your Vote, Portland City Council Forum with Steve Dunn.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us on this Monday. I have 7 Portland City Council candidates anxiously waiting to share their ideas for improving livability in the city of Portland. You'll meet them in just a moment. But first of all, we have a message from this program's sponsor, Willamette University.
I'm Steve Thorsett, president of Willamette University. We are proud to support K2's Your Voice, Your Vote election coverage. For nearly 2 centuries, Willamette's mission has been to educate leaders for civic society. We believe a healthy democracy depends on thoughtful and ethical leaders in government, and especially on an informed electorate. We're grateful for the discussions and debates K2 brings to our community. Thanks for watching.
Office with the city, filing a candidate committee with the Secretary of State's office, filing contribution and expenditure reports with the Secretary of State's office, receiving certification to participate in Portland's small donor elections, and being among the candidates with the highest number of individual contributions. We asked 7, and we got 7 today. We want to meet the candidates right now, if we can, participating in this forum from District 1. In alphabetical order now, we have Candace Avalos, we have Jamie Murphy, we have Timur Ender with us today as well. We have Jamie Murphy, Noah Ernst, Timur Ender, Terrence Hayes, Steph, Routh, and Loretta Smith all with us this morning, and I want to thank you all for being here as well. Now, the candidates drew numbers to see who would start, and we want to begin with Loretta Smith. You were the lucky one that picked it today, Loretta, so thanks for being here today. I'd like to begin with this question. I need just a 1- or 2-word answer from you. Number 1 issue you'll address as member of the Portland City Council. Just a word or 2.
Public
Loretta.
safety.
Public safety's it. Okay, I want to circle back around to Candace. What do you think? Number 1 issue.
Community safety.
Next.
Yeah. Livability. And just to clarify, it's Jamie Dunphy.
Well, but Jamie Dunphy it is. Next.
Community
Timur?
safety.
Public safety.
Public safety.
Housing and homelessness.
Okay, we got back. We just heard from the candidates. Now we would like to hear from you. And here's what's going on here. What do you think is the biggest issue Portland City Council should focus on? We just started this question this morning at KATU.com. Here are responses so far. We got public safety. We can look at that, 67%. That's a big one for folks. And of course, we have homelessness, also a very big issue for Portlanders at 33%. And the drug crisis and economy, we'll see how folks will weigh in. And to weigh in, just go to KATU.com, look for the story on this forum, and let us know what you think about it. Our guests will answer the questions, the same questions. They have each 60 seconds to respond. And we're going to begin with this question from a gentleman we met in District 1. Let's play that.
How are you going to get rid of the homeless or fix the problem? It's not working, whatever you're doing now, and it hasn't. Muggings, beatings, drug deals, fentanyl. It's a sad case for Portland.
Did you hear all that? Could you hear that question, folks? They couldn't hear it. Can we play that again for them? Is that possible so that we could hear it out here? He was basically, I'm going to read it for you. How are you going to get rid of the homelessness problem or fix the problem? It's not working. Whatever you're doing, it hasn't. Muggings, beatings, drug deals, fentanyl, it's a sad case for Portland. Candace, let's begin with you. Your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with a lot of the Portlanders who have weighed in and said that community safety is a #1 concern, and it ties to all of the other concerns around housing and homelessness. And for me, environmental justice is a big part of community safety as well. I agree that people feel that the city has not delivered, and I think there are ways that we can strategically improve that. I think we need to be a better partner with the county. We have to solve this problem together. So it's important that the city officials are collaborating. I think that, you know, we need to make sure that we're putting solutions forward that are going to be efficient, cost effective, and are what people are needing. I think that's the #1 thing we need to assess is what do folks need and how are we going to meet that need.
Jamie?
You know, our region doesn't have a common definition of what success looks like for homelessness. We have these systems like the Joint Office of Homeless Services, we have these collaboration agreements, but we don't agree what success actually looks like, and we don't have a definition of what our lane is versus other people's lanes. Our system of government and the overlapping forms of government currently incentivize finger pointing. They don't incentivize leadership. And the different layers of the city, the county, metro, state, and federal government really means so that everybody has a plausible ability to say, oh, that's not my problem. I think with this next city council, the inherent change in form of government it means that people are going to be more collaborative and more towards coalition building, which is the only way you're going to be able to get anything accomplished through a 12-person city council. But I think that those skills will also translate towards working with other regional partners on a common definition of success, what the city council's unique and specific role is, and running as hard as we can at that answer.
Tamora?
Sure, we need to give people a place to be, whether that's shelters or housing, instead of just having people on the street. And so part of that is the city needs to increase the number of outreach workers, so we have to meet people where they are, connect them with services, and also pay attention to the gaps in services. So intervening when someone leaves the foster care system or leaves incarceration. So these kind of gaps in the system, we have to make sure that people are kind of graduating and supporting them. I'm also a proponent of things like expungement. So after someone has served their time, that past criminal history is not a barrier to housing and employment. So, and we have to concentrate on affordability. So I'm a proponent of Inner East Side for All, which seeks to increase housing affordability and availability in the Inner East Side, which then reduces displacement and has more opportunities for middle housing and things like that, especially in areas with high tree canopy and great transportation. East Portland today is one of the areas that has the highest displacement risk, and so that will help address that as well.
Noah Ernst.
So I think the #1 thing is to look at it from a public safety perspective. We have to increase the number of police officers that we have so that when you have an emergency situation, they actually can arrive. Because that gentleman talked a lot about the auxiliary connections to homelessness around crime, around drug use, around those different things. And unless we have a sufficiently staffed police system, we're never going to be able to respond to those things in a timely manner. In addition to which, I really believe that one of the things that's incredibly important is accountability in all the systems that we have to address the homeless issue. Last year, we spent approximately $62,000 per individual homeless person, and we've spent upwards of $70,000 per homeless person in previous years, and I don't think anybody thinks that it's working. And so we need to have accountability for where the money that we're spending as a city is going, whether or not it's achieving the goal of reducing homelessness, which is ultimately all of our goals, because we all want to have a city where there aren't people living on the streets. And so I think those two factors are incredibly important.
Terrence Hayes, you're next.
Thank you. So for the most part, homelessness is a county issue, and we need to hold the county accountable for the way it spends city funding. On the other side, when you're talking about fentanyl, crime, we got to make sure that our police force is up to par so that we can hold people accountable that's committing crimes. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter whether you're homeless or not. If you're committing crimes, we need to be able to hold you accountable for that. And if that's not the issue, we need to make sure that people have shelters and homes in our community so that they're less likely in those situations to commit crimes just to survive.
Steph, Routh?
I appreciate the conversation and appreciate especially accountability and the importance of wraparound services. I serve on the city's planning commission, and one thing that we talked about some years ago, about 3 or 4 years ago, was the shelter to housing continuum. And so I think we need to look at how do we diversify the toolkit of a diversity of shelters, because our unhoused population is also our most diverse population. And so what do different shelter options need to look like in order to ensure success, to get people into a place where we can permanently house people. I also think that it's really important to focus on good neighbor agreements in the places where there are shelters to ensure that the neighborhood as a whole is set up to have conversations in real time, to be able to maintain public safety issues that both Noah and Terrence have suggested.
Loretta Smith, you are next.
Thank you. I think that public safety is an issue for many because we have 5,300 unsanctioned folks who are in camps, and we have RVs. And when we reduce that, that's when we'll say we have had some success. And so for me, I was fighting for years to make sure that we had places for people to go who are outside. Wapato. Now Wapato is now the Bybee Lakes, and they're having much success. If we would have had that many years ago when I was fighting for that in 2016, 2017, we could have had a majority of these folks off the streets. But I think right now what people want to see in East Portland, they want to be able to go to their parks and feel safe. They want to be able to walk their kids to school. My grandkids go to Margaret Scott. They want to be able to walk their kids to the bus stop, or have their kids walk alone to the bus stop without being harassed by people who are basically homeless. And so for me, that's what I'm going to be looking for, and I'm also going to be looking for a third step. We constantly talk about addiction services and mental health services. We need workforce opportunities for people who are on the street.
There is now a citywide camping ban, as you all know.
Yes.
Here's my question to you. Do you support fining and eventually jailing people who camp on public property, who've refused repeated offers of shelter, including the option to move into the city's temporary alternative shelter sites? And I want to begin with Jamie Dunphy on that one. Jamie?
Yeah, I would say I don't support the current proposal of the ban because A, we don't have enough capacity in all of the neighborhoods to be able to actually send people somewhere, especially on the east side. We hear about a lot of the attention towards like diversion centers and all this capacity that's being done in Northwest Portland or in the inner southeast, but in the east side, we just don't have places for people to go. What we are doing in that system is just functionally punishing people without an option. So no, I don't currently support this, and additionally, our response has been so disjointed and so inconsistent and so lacking a common North Star that the people on the street do not trust that these systems are going to be actually serving them. And so I don't blame a lot of these folks who are service resistant for not wanting to go into a system that has not proven to be effective for them.
Timur?
Yeah.
We have to increase shelter capacity. I mean, generally, if there is something that meets someone's needs, has a lock and door, has services, we see people wanting to go there. We see wait lists. And so to me, that's the city's role. One of the most frightening statistics right now is that the highest growing rate of people experiencing homelessness is over the age of 55. We have to do more to prevent homelessness in the first place. We have to expand the services and meet people where they are. And I think that is where it's most appropriate to put city resources. Jailing people, there is a role for enforcement. However, jail is the most expensive form of housing.
Noah?
Well, I don't know that I would say I support it. What I would say is it's possible that it becomes necessary, right? The city and its public places belong to everybody. And what we have right now is a segment of the population who unfortunately is homeless, but is systematically overtaking our public spaces. And if we provide alternate places for them to camp, where we can provide services in an efficient way, where we can provide basic necessities like water and sanitation, and people don't want to go there, at a certain point, there has to be a carrot and a stick. We have to say, you can no longer take over the park in our neighborhood. We want our kids to be able to play there. You can no longer take over the sidewalks with a tent because we have disabled people who need to walk along them. The city is for all of us.
Terrence Hayes?
Yeah, I definitely support the camping ban. I think that encampments are not safe for people. And we actually see that we're moving in the right direction. We're starting to see some clarity, and we have to be able to keep going in the path we're going on. As a person who works in public safety, I know that the rise in gun violence, sex trafficking, kidnaps, drug dealings, that is happening in encampments more than we see in any other place. We cannot normalize allowing people to stay in bad places simply because it feels good for us. We gotta push people towards shelter, towards services, so that we can get our most vulnerable population off of the streets.
Steph?
I agree that I think we need to support shelter options, and we need to have shelter options. Like, there is the reason that a large number of the people who are currently camping outside have nowhere else to go. It is actually a pretty small group of folks who I think are not willing to go into shelter. We do not have enough of them. And so I also hear a lot of folks, I mean, we have all had a lot of conversations with people, and I think that there is a lot of compassion for people who are experiencing some of the worst times of their life. Another statistic that Oregon has the dubious honor of having the most unsheltered homeless families with children in the United States. And so I think we need to look at that. I also hear that that what people have the highest concerns for are some of the behaviors, dangerous behaviors, housed or unhoused. And so in the case of dangerous behavior that threatens public safety, sure, jail and arrest is appropriate, housed or unhoused.
Loretta, your thoughts on the camping ban?
I do support the camping ban. Multnomah County, along with the city of Portland's money, $31 million that we send over there, they have more than enough money to get these folks off the street, even if they have to put them into hotels. We have a lot of buildings downtown Portland. People have left these buildings and they're no longer able to serve the business community. We need to figure out how to repurpose, reuse, and get folks off the street. We have $350 million, and Multnomah County's joint office left $125 million on the table that they had not spent. So for someone to tell me we don't have a place for them to go, I'm not buying it. We do have a place for them to go. We can buy them a hotel room until we get other long-term housing options for them, but we do have other options, and I do support the camping ban.
Candace, I want to circle back to you. Same question to you.
We do not have and have never had enough shelter options. And I think ultimately I'm not willing to gamble people's real lives for political expediency. I think that it is our responsibility to provide the options that people need, especially as we are considering the fact that those needs are very diverse and complex. And I think it's our responsibility to ensure everybody's safety, and that includes our unhoused population. Our public spaces should be shared by everyone who lives in this community, and that includes the folks that are struggling and are unsheltered. And so I think it's important that we are finding the actual solutions before we start criminalizing folks, and then that is only going to lead to the spiraling that further traps them into a cycle of homelessness. So I do not support the ban.
I want to switch to public safety now. That's one of the issues a lot of you talked about when I asked what was the #1 topic. We visited District 1 to talk with residents about their concerns. Drug use came up multiple times. Legislators recriminalized possession of small amounts of hard drugs like fentanyl in Oregon and allowed counties to implement deflection programs. Is this enough to tackle Portland's drug crisis? If not, what changes would you push for? And Tamora, let's begin with you on this one.
Sure. Yeah, I just want to highlight this is a very recent change in state law. I'm glad the legislature looked at it. I support what they did. The deflection center is not even up yet. So I think, before we kind of move on from that, we need to make sure that is implemented in a kind of fair and accurate way. So I'm committed to ensuring that people who choose deflection have that process and then also have the accountability to follow through. So I think that's going to be very important going forward.
Noah?
So I think, obviously, I think that the recriminalization was a good thing. I think it's pretty obvious that the decriminalization had unintended and disastrous consequences. I think that we need to from a public safety perspective, what we saw in a lot of neighborhoods across the city was essentially open air drug markets, essentially people using illegal drugs openly in front of everybody. And I think that we do need a greater law enforcement response, in order to reduce those kinds of things, because those bring in all kinds of other crimes. People don't always fund their drug abuse habits through legitimate means, frankly. And so I think it's a good thing. I think that the public safety aspect of it is really important. We do need, oh, sorry.
You're seeing the big rap back
I
there.
did.
That's what slowed you down a little bit. Noah, let's move on to you. Terrence Hayes, you're next.
So no, I don't think that we fix the problem that simply. I think treatment, rehab, wraparound services, this actually helps us. You cannot arrest or jail your way out of an addiction problem. What we have to be able to do is hold folks accountable, but once they have that opportunity to get sober, we need to have places for them to go. We need to have wraparound services. We need to have workforce opportunity. So simply recognizing that we should have never legalized hard drugs is not enough. We have to be very intentional about creating pathways of sobriety for folks. That's whether they come home or whether they're in our community. We have to do better holistically with services.
Steph, you're next.
I think the largest criticism that we had around Measure 110, which I agree with, was the implementation and the fact that health services were not online to allow for people to go and get the help that they needed. I think a concern with currently the rollout of 4002 is also that deflection is taking longer to get up and going. So I think we really need to commit. We need to work with the county. That is primarily a county issue, but we need to support wherever we can in terms of ensuring that there are deflection and other health services available so that we can ensure that people are getting the help that they need, because addiction is a health issue. It is not a crime.
Loretta, you are next.
So we need to make sure as city councilors that we have a safe, clean, and sanitary city. And right now we don't have that. We want to make sure that we have enough services and wraparound supports for people who are in our homeless ecosystem. But we also need to marry that with workforce opportunities. I keep hearing over and over again about addiction services and mental health services, but we have to have a track where we have these folks go into workforce training. The City of Chicago, Illinois University, they did a study that showed 53% of the people who were in homeless shelters, they had employment. And those folks who were outside, unhoused, that they had employment prior to being on the streets. If that's the case, we need to set up those same systems and infrastructure, bring in traded sector jobs into the East Portland area. $60,000 a year is what the average person makes in our district, compared to $90,000 in the rest of the city. We need to change that narrative. We need to get our reputation together, and we need to do it quick. You give me $350 million, and I'll tell you what I'll do with the 5,300 people who's out on the streets.
Candace, you are next.
Well, I'm definitely not going to pretend to be an expert on how we mitigate an addiction crisis. That is not new to Portland. It's a nationwide issue that we're facing. And so that's actually my point, is that I think that our government partners are not doing the work to build the correct relationships, partnerships with groups that are working on the ground with our communities. And in general, I think my value is that I do not support using government resources to punish people for problems that we should be using those resources to solve.
Jamie Dunphy.
Yeah, I don't think there's anybody who would say that the last 40 years of the war on drugs was in any way successful. The war on drugs failed. But Measure 110 was also not the panacea we thought it was going to be. And that was implementation. That was because the state and the elected officials who were supposed to do their jobs never did their jobs. In our district right now, at Fora Health, used to be called St. Vincent de Paul, they have 21 beds for people who want to get clean today. But they cannot hire enough nurses to staff those beds. And they have a line of people who want to get clean today, and they have to turn them away because they can only staff 14 of those beds. The state has not gotten out of its own way to even license the number of nurses that we are going to need to deal with the people who want to get clean. So whatever Measure 110 was, however that implemented it, that wasn't what the voters wanted, and that was just a failure of leadership.
We're going to stay on the public safety issue for you folks. Portland has struggled, you know that, to keep up with crime. What would you do to improve public safety? What would you do as a city councilor to improve public safety. And Noel, we're going to begin with you.
Well, I mentioned it before. I think it's important to increase the number of law enforcement people that we have. Right, the average for a city this size would be approximately between 16 and 20 per 10,000 people in population, and we have approximately 12 law enforcement officers per 10,000. So we're far below what an average for a city our size is, and what that's led to is longer 911 hold times, longer police response times, and sometimes the police not responding at all because they don't have the capacity. So that has to change. And I think it's important that when you call the police and you have an emergency, that someone responds. They respond in a timely manner. People don't call 911 because they have a lot of time to wait. And I can give you an example. Across the street from our house, my wife witnessed two homeless people beating my next door neighbor with a baseball bat and called the police, 911. We have an assault going on, and they were unable to respond at all. And that's not good for the city. That's not good for the individuals involved, and it just has to change.
Terrence Hayes, questions for you.
So yeah, I think that we have to have enough officers to respond. That's just given. I think we all should be able to acknowledge that. That's not rocket science. I think the other side of that is that we have to fund our community-based organizations that do the work every day in a preventative way. The simple answer is not catch people when they commit crimes. How do we prevent those things? How do we get resources into community so that folks is not committing crimes? We know poverty and criminality is connected to one another. So we need to make sure that we're building out enough infrastructure in a community-based organizations so that we can address those early issues, right? We always talk about root causes. We got to get the economics out there. And as a city, we have to normalize encouraging people to be a part of our police force. We have to bring back a conversation where, yes, we want accountability, we want well training, but we want our officers to show up. So community and policing has to do this together if we want to become a safe city again.
Steph, you are next.
Great. To build on that, I feel the community policing and building in community-based organizations to help support police response and to support other agency responses such as CHAT, such as Portland Street Response, other programs that help us build a web of safety is really important. And I think how do we, I think at base, when someone is in distress, you want to call. Have someone to call. You want that response to be quick and you want it to be appropriate. And so there are high acuity calls that require a police response. There are lower acuity calls that, by lower I mean someone who is having mental distress in a park, for example, and that has a different, like Portland Street Response. I live in Lentz, that is where Portland Street Response was piloted, and that is an appropriate response. I think also looking at, after school programs and other community-based solutions to help develop connectedness and a sense of belonging so that we all build that safety mechanism together.
Loretta, you are next.
As a county commissioner, when I served from 2011 to 2018, I started a program called Summer Works. And I used to tell my young people every year, I have never seen a kid doing a drive-by on their way to work. So I think we need to partner with those organizations, those community-based organizations who have success, like Latino Network, IRCO, SEI, POIC, NEA. Those are the organizations who can help build out a structure so that we can get people to make sure that they're not on the streets, they're not homeless, they're not committing crimes and those kinds of things. But we also have to use some of our resources from the city to put in place workforce training. We have infrastructure projects that are in the state right now that we don't have enough skilled and trained workers to meet the commitment that we have. Once we do that, and once we make it an emergency, a true emergency, and if I'm not mistaken, we're still under an emergency order that we started when I was there in 2014. It does not look like we are in an emergency right now.
Candace, how do you improve public safety?
Well, what I believe our community wants and deserves is the right responder at the right time for the right reasons. And what that means is that we really need to modernize our entire first responder ecosystem. Chat and Portland Street Response have been brought up. Those are good examples of ways to diversify how we respond to various different, public safety issues. And so I think ultimately we need to be looking at how we're modernizing what our communities are needing and how we're meeting that need, and also not wasting expensive resources like sending a fire truck or a police car when we could, reduce that need by sending somebody that needs to spend some time with folks. I think that's the other thing, is that the need is so big that a lot of times we need folks to spend time with people in crisis, and that's a drain on resources, right? So we need to understand what is the full spectrum of public safety needs and build in different systems in our ecosystem for that.
Jamie Dunphy.
Yeah, I agree with what a lot of my colleagues have said so far. We do need more police. We have a wave of coming retirements. It takes 18 months from a new recruit to be hired to get through training, and we do need to replace people who have already left the force in some vacancies and try to be able to build up that force. But we also have been sending police and treating police rather as a general purpose fix-all tool for government regulation. And it's often wildly inappropriate, the situations that we send an armed officer into, where a park ranger or a noise enforcement officer or a parking enforcement person could be in charge of actually doing these sort of responses. So we need to diversify the tool chest, absolutely, in order to have it so that our police officers are able to respond to those scary situations, like it's someone being beaten with a baseball bat. That is absolutely terrifying. At the same time, I firmly believe that there are no amount of police officers who could patrol up and down Hawthorne Boulevard at 1 in the morning that will have the same effect on community safety as a concert getting out at 1 in the morning and people being out in the community, going to shops, going to bars, going out and being a part of the community. I think that we have an opportunity as a community to actually come back to public spaces and reclaim those spaces as a community response.
Timur.
Sure. I'll just echo what Candace and Steph said about having those continuum of services, whether that's Portland Street Response, police officers, park rangers. We need kind of the broad diversity. The other thing I'll flag too is East Portlanders today have a life expectancy 10 years less than people living west of 82nd Avenue. This is due to higher rates of gun violence. This is due to disproportionate amount of traffic crashes, which ultimately tie back to a historic underinvestment and a lack of political representation for East Portland. One of the reasons I'm running is this is the first time there are political boundaries tied to East Portland's health outcomes. So for me, the way I kind of view gun violence and some of these kind of chronic issues that reverberate is, we have to address it from the right tools for city government. So for example, green spaces, street lighting, all of these kind of place-based interventions that have an impact on both crime and preventing gun violence. Also support things like a voluntary gun buyback program, violence interrupters, and to prevent retaliatory shootings. And then also, as Jamie mentioned, kind of the community-based community building efforts, whether that's Sunday parkways, movies in the park. We have to create these opportunities where people feel safe in their communities.
All right, I want to ask you another question. I got somewhat of a hint to where you're all leaning on this particular issue, but I want to get specific on it. Do you support funding, additional funding for the Portland Police Bureau? Do you support additional funding for that? And just give me a little sentence or two why. And Terrence, I want to begin with you on that.
Absolutely. I think at this stage, I hear people talking about gun violence and the things that's really important in our community. But unlike everybody else sitting up here, I'm a person that actually has been a victim and someone who's caused gun violence in the community. This thought that somehow we can exclude police from that process is just not true. The numbers or the data don't support that. I do this work every day. We gotta have officers that can be a part of that can get ahead of gun violence, as Timur was talking about, to get ahead of retaliatory violence, and we have to support. So yes, we gotta get more officers, and as Noah said, we have to be at best practice in our city.
Steph, what do you think?
I think we need to fill our current vacancies because we are understaffed, and so we absolutely need to fill those vacancies. Would also love to support how do we recruit particularly Portlanders to be Portland police, that police officers to see people as neighbors first when they're on a call. So that's the short answer.
Loretta, what do you think on that? Funding police.
Short answer, I think we need to fund additional police. We need to fund the entire infrastructure of public safety. That means increasing the number, not just staffing up to the 88 that Steph is talking about, but we need to go over and beyond. There's understaffing in the fire department, there's understaffing in the 911 system. We need to do the whole public safety ecosystem and fund them to a level of the size of city that we are. I know for sure that there are many things that happen in East Portland that wouldn't happen if there was a presence. When we took the Multnomah County Sheriff's Office out of 122nd in Gleason, crime went way, way up. One of the things that I do want to do, and I want to partner with Multnomah County and see what we can do with that space. It's 4 acres of land that's not being used. I fought and fought to get folks from being over there. Our previous county administration, they put homeless folks in there. It has asbestos and all kind of toxic things in that building. We need to take that building down, use that as an asset, and put police back there and maybe do a multi-use project that includes affordable housing, market rate, and middle housing.
Candace, what do you think on this, supporting funding for police?
I will hold the police bureau to the same standard I will hold every other bureau, which is how are you delivering with the dollars that we are allocating? The police bureau has an enormous budget, and we are struggling to fill those vacancies. We are struggling to deliver on our outcomes, and also we are meeting some other outcomes. So I think I would hold them to that same standard of before I make some decision arbitrarily of whether to increase the dollars, is how are they using their current dollars? Is that to the best outcome of the entire ecosystem that we need to address?
Jamie?
Yeah, the Bureau has enormous budget right now to hire staff and get them on the street. It takes 18 months to hire a new recruit and get them out on the beat, but they have the funding that they need right now to fill those vacancies and fix a lot of our problems. It's not, I don't believe that it's simply a budget problem right now.
Timur.
I support filling the vacancies. I also support having that continuum. So my real vision for the future of the police bureau is, not everything needs to go through a police officer. If there's a car wreck, if there's someone that needs to be directing traffic or finding someone who ran away from home, some of those things can be done by a public safety support specialist. So right now we're putting a lot of call types through police, and my vision is we're diversifying so that police don't have the pressure to address every single one of these crises because it takes so long to bring a police officer online, and that's outside the city's control. So we need to control what we can control and be strategic about where we're deploying police resources.
Noah, police funding is the topic.
I would absolutely support increasing police funding for additional officers. Again, it's not just the vacancies that we have, it's getting to what is appropriate in terms of the number of officers for the size of the city. And I think a lot of people have mentioned that there's other important parts of the public safety net that also need to be strengthened, but I think law enforcement is one of them. There's so many things that we can't do in this city if people don't feel that it's safe. And so a lot of things that people talk about going out, about using our public spaces, if people fundamentally don't believe those places are safe, they won't go. And we have to have the officers so that when they're unsafe, they can be made safe.
I want to shift gears once again for you guys. The housing crisis extends across the state of Oregon, particularly in Portland. In 2015, in fact, the city declared a housing emergency. The city's housing needs analysis predicts we need to build 120,000 new homes in the next 20 years to meet the current and projected demand. The city is far below that goal. Here's the question to you. What steps would you take to increase the availability of housing? What steps would you take as a city councilor? Steph, let's begin with you.
All right. Well, we have had a housing needs analysis multiple times. This is the first time that we have ever had a housing production strategy, and it just passed a couple of weeks ago. So we've known that we have had a crisis for a very long time, but this is the first time that we have actually said, okay, so now what are we going to do about it? And what is the number that we need? And so we have we have a better understanding of that number. I think one, we recently re-legalized housing choice, so we can have ADUs, we can have duplexes, triplexes. So how do we help build that up? We're already seeing early returns in that in neighborhoods like Brentwood, Darlington. We're seeing housing prices come down and more starter houses come on the market, and I think that's critical for home ownership as well as apartments and rentals. I also feel like we need to streamline this permitting process. It's really easy to get a housing permit in La Grande, less so in Portland, and so we need to make that an easy process. I think I'm excited about the single permitting authority that we're just starting, and so we really need to lean into that.
Loretta Smith.
I think we need to start out by land banking. We should purchase multiplexes while we have this $350 million pot. We should buy multiplexes all throughout the city of Portland, because if you build them new, it costs anywhere between $400,000 and $700,000 a door. We need to figure out how to expand the multi program, which gives tax breaks for developers to add a different level of tenant from the 30 percentile to the 60 percentile in the market rate housing. And we also should have an opportunity to give folks who are in low income housing an opportunity to purchase homes. There's a program with HUD that will allow Section 8 vouchers to be used to purchase homes if folks are working at least 30 hours a week. That's huge. And we need to take some of these buildings in downtown Portland that have been left behind. We need to go and put those buildings, particularly the public sector buildings, the old McCoy building that was in Multnomah County, turn that into affordable housing and turn some of these other buildings into affordable housing.
Candace, what do you think?
Well, it's definitely clear that the private market is not going to solve this problem for us. And so that government really needs to lean in and figure out how do we work in collaboration with the private market, but also do things like land banking, like having a strategy and being able to execute on that. I feel really excited about our new form of government. I think that's really going to exacerbate our ability to streamline all of our services, because housing production, it falls across many different bureaus. And right now, leadership is just really disjointed because it's just not structured in a way that makes it efficient for us to move forward on a goal. So I feel confident that the new form of government, coupled with these strategies that we are starting to put in motion, are going to really keep those wheels going.
Jamie?
I don't think there's one strategy. I think it's going to be a series of strategies. In 2019, I'll just say that, starting over, we've been incentivizing the wrong type of housing for years. In 2019, I was working in City Hall. I was working as a senior policy director for Commissioner Nick Fish. And the county came to the city council and said that at that night, the point-in-time count said there were about 4,000 neighbors sleeping on the street. And the next month, the Housing Bureau came to the City Council and said that there were about 4,200 vacant housing units in the city at that moment, but that 80% of those were in the luxury end, and most of those were in those towers in South Waterfront. We need to fix our incentive structures to actually bring the kind of needed housing where we really need it, and the right kind of housing. There's no excuse that it can take twice as long to permit an apartment complex in Portland as it does in neighboring cities like Gresham, Happy Valley, or Vancouver. They aren't getting half the quality of the housing. Their systems just work better. We have vacant land in East Portland that could be rapidly turned into housing. There's a burned down laundromat near my house that could be turned into housing very quickly. We just need to have the representation and the systems that will actually incentivize that kind of development where the housing is needed.
Timur, what do you think on this?
Sure, a few things. I agree. East Portland has really been burdened by vacant land, and that's led to a whole host of negative outcomes. And particularly, we should not have people sleeping outside of government-owned vacant land. We need to put that to use. So I support things like a vacancy tax so we can have people moving on some of this vacant land. A few other things, I support housing vouchers and union contracts so that people can afford to live in the place they work. I support looking at city-owned land that could be deemed surplus and put toward productive housing use. And then I also support looking at a whole host of regulations that define features that are associated with housing but are not housing. For example, one of my neighbors built a house right next to his house, and the city of Portland required him to build a street that's 100 feet for a cost of $100,000. I mean, and really what that does is drive up the cost of housing. We need to be more flexible in our approach. I mean, if that street is only leading to one house, maybe it doesn't need to be so wide. Maybe we can be more flexible on some of those requirements, which will overall bring down the cost of housing.
Noah Ernst, your thoughts?
I think that it's important to remember that the city of Portland doesn't build, right? They hire people, they work with people. The private sector builds almost all of the housing that we have. And so the important thing is, and a couple of people have mentioned this, is what are we incentivizing? And more importantly, what are we disincentivizing? If you want affordable housing, then you have to make sure that you make it as affordable as possible for a contractor or developer to build it. And the more requirements that you put on it, the more different regulations that the city has for it. Again, things like Timor was sending around requiring a whole street to be put in, the higher the price of that housing goes, and the less likely it is to get built. And we've seen some really well-intentioned programs and requirements of adding low-income housing to apartment buildings and things like that that have led to them not being built because it undermines the profits of the developer who's trying to build in our city. So we really have to be careful about what we're incentivizing, what the requirements we place on construction and housing do to the prices, and how we can incentivize the housing that we need.
Terrence, I want to get your thoughts on this.
Yeah, I think the government got to get out of the way. We went through a long 4 to 6 years where every day we looked up, there was some new thing that we wanted to put on the back of everyday citizens who were trying to rent homes and be landlords. And then we did the same thing with private money and big building. We do this thing in this city where every time somebody's uncomfortable, they put their burden or their concerns on folks that's actually tasked with providing housing in our community, in our city. So we need to look at all those policies that we've created that make private folks not want to invest in our city and make everyday citizens not want to open their doors up to be renters. So we have to be honest about that, and we need to make people excited again about renting their homes, and we need to make private investors excited about investing in our city.
We have another viewer question for you now. With the affordability issue in Portland, here's a comment that I bet a lot of people would like to hear your response to. Let's play it.
Make the rent cheaper. It is impossible to live in Portland. The rents are way, way too high.
You guys are probably having trouble hearing that in the studio, but I can tell you the folks watching this at home online are hearing that soundbite. But the person asked, make the rent cheaper. It's impossible to live in Portland. The rents are way too high. What can you do as city councilor to lower the cost of rents in the city of Portland? And Loretta, let's begin with you on this one.
I think we need to think about how do we share homes. There are a lot of seniors who are house rich, cash poor. If we make it where they could get a tax credit if they open up their homes and rent out 2 or 3 of the bedrooms in their big houses, that would be great. We could cut down the system development charges to put in ADUs on these double lot properties. There are a number of things that we could do, but if we start with those two, I think that that would be a good opportunity to get some of our folks who are at the brink of being homeless and not being able to afford their place and being able to afford a nice place with other people who are just like them.
Candace, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I agree, and there's all kinds of different strategies, but I think taking it a step back, what's important to recognize in the sentiment of that viewer is that everything is expensive, not just rent. And we are continuing to not fuel good economic development strategies to help everyday Portlanders meet all of their needs, not just their housing needs, their food needs, their utility needs. And so I think it is our responsibility when it comes to economic development, workforce development, to ensure that we're lifting everybody up in their salaries, and that will address the rental issue. Of course, there are specific strategies like the ones that Loretta was mentioning, but I think the big picture and the sentiment that people feel is just that we're not doing enough to make it easier for people to live, work, and play in our city, and I think that is our responsibility to address holistically.
Getting those rent prices down. Your thoughts, Jamie Dunphy?
Yeah, I think that a lot of this is a supply side issue, that we just don't have enough housing. And you know, a lot of times focus of the city is building that affordable housing that the market simply doesn't respond to. But what I have seen is that as the lack of market rate housing in other places, more maybe higher desirable neighborhoods like fancy areas of Northwest or inner Northeast, as housing becomes harder to get there, it's a ripple effect that goes all the way out across the city. And we feel it especially in East Portland as new neighbors are coming in and seeing rents rise and are displacing a lot of folks. So we need market rate, we need affordable housing, we need multifamily housing, we need single family housing options and duplexes and triplexes. And at the same time, we also need to crack down on some of these corporate landlords that are sitting on vacant properties for years at a time. In fact, I've been told that there are condos in South Waterfront towers that have never been tenanted at all. I'm interested in looking at a vacancy tax and trying to keep track of the fact that we already know where all these landlords are. We have a landlord registry. I think that if those are kept vacant for a long period of time, I think that that's criminal, and I think that we should incentivize against that.
Timur, your thoughts on this one?
A few things. I support the advocacy group Portland Neighbors Welcome Inner East Side for All campaign, which seeks to increase density, particularly in inner Portland areas with high tree canopy, low displacement risk, and great transportation. One of the things I see at my child's elementary school right now is people being displaced from inner Portland because of high cost, and then those, you know, put pressure on people in East Portland. So I think if someone's moving to inner Portland, outer Portland because they're displaced from inner Portland, that is a policy issue that needs a policy intervention. Second thing is the city has a role in terms of reducing costs and increasing affordability, not just for housing, but the second budget item for Portland families is transportation. So the more we can do things like transit-oriented development, bike share, the transportation wallet program, which allows people to access TriMet and things like Youth Pass, bike share, all of these things end up reducing overall costs for Portlanders and increasing healthy, sustainable transportation options. So I think those two things are key in working together.
Noah Ernst.
I think that Jamie was right. It's a very much a supply side issue. We have been delaying and undermining development of housing in Portland through the way the permitting office has been inefficient, by the increased barrier or burdens that we put on developers. And so fundamentally, the number one way to drive down prices is to have more housing. And so I think that the things that the city council that a lot of people have talked about in order to stimulate and incentivize building of more housing units is one of the major ways that we'll be able to do it. We should look at how many housing units have been of long-term rentals have been taken off the long-term rental market and turned into short-term rentals, and is that something that is good for us as a city? Because every one of those that's being used as essentially hotel is no longer being used to house a family or house people who live in Portland. What has that done to overall housing prices? And we really have to look at, is there a reason we still have minimum lot sizes for houses, and are they too big? Can we incentivize, is there a reason we have square footage minimums, and can those be adjusted in order to encourage and allow smaller housing to increase density in neighborhoods without fundamentally changing the feel of the neighborhood?
Terrence, I want to give you a chance on this one.
So yeah, I'll say this. How do we, as a council, actually impact that? I think, again, we get out of the way of developers and we get out of the way of everyday community members that want to rent their homes. The supply side, the demand side, if we can increase that by getting out of the way as a city, I think we will drive prices down point blank.
Steph?
I want to recognize a tension I think we're all kind of talking on different sides of, is the inherent tension that housing is both a basic human need, and it is the number one way that we build multi-generational wealth. And so from the supply side, as I believe Noah and a few others have said, we don't tend to build housing. So as Loretta mentioned and Candace both, we do need to land bank. You know, we need to get into that. The only rents that we can truly control are buildings that we as a city own, and we don't really have that in that moment. I think that there are incentives from the supply side when we are incentivizing deeply affordable housing. We need to couple that with requirements that there is deep affordability for a longer period of time. So I think that there's some things that we can do in terms of incentives, in terms of trade-offs, and also in terms of production, just building more gentle, as they call it, gentle density, more duplexes, more triplexes, and make that, people want to do that. So let's make that thing that we also want the easy thing for other people to make happen.
As you probably know, here at K2, we work side by side with Univision, which is the Spanish language network here. Next question is from one of our Univision colleagues. And again, I'll read it for you folks. We'll go ahead and play that.
Hello, I'm Guillermo Mota. I'm a reporter for Univision Portland. Talking to Latinos in the area, they feel as there's a lack of connection between government officials and the Spanish-speaking community. How do you plan on addressing this matter and gain their trust in their language?
There you go. There's the question. No, you didn't hear it, but Guillermo wants to know what you will do to make a connection with the Spanish-speaking population in the city of Portland. How will you improve that connection? Candace, let's start with you.
Bueno, para empezar, yo soy bilingüe. So I'm actually from a Guatemalan immigrant family. So this is a personal issue for me, ensuring that we're making everything accessible to various languages. That's something that we do a lot and advocate for in my work at Verde, which means green in Spanish. We do environmental justice work. And we know that when it comes to, for example, climate resilient safety, if we're not getting information, if our governments are not giving people information in a timely fashion, in a way that they can understand, they can't act as quickly, and therefore they suffer as a result. And so I think holistically, it's important that we are increasing access to various languages, to all of our materials, but in general, I think it also is about representation. Being able to talk to people on the doors. I've been knocking doors, getting folks to, get engaged in this election. And many of the folks that I'm speaking to in East Portland are speaking Spanish, and that is their first language. And so I think being able to have access to somebody on council that speaks the language would make a big difference in the population.
Jamie, your thoughts?
Yeah, I started my career in East Portland working in the David Douglas School District in a school that had 40% of the students not speak English at home. East Portland is the most diverse community in the region and is home to 51% of all the people of color. And what we know more than anything is that those folks who live on 145th and Division are not going to go and advocate to City Hall all the way downtown to try and get their potholes filled. We need to go start building those relationships with community early before we ask anything of them, and we need to bring the services of government to them where they are in the community. I think that focusing as much of if I'm elected, focusing as much of my effort and energy around bringing constituent services in the languages that people need it, where they are living their lives and experiencing the conditions that could be improved, is how we really start building that trust, and it's a long-term game.
Tamora, how do we improve that connection?
Sure. I just feel really privileged that East Portland has over 100 languages represented, and I am part of that diversity. We speak Turkish at home. I'm the son of Turkish immigrants. I'm the first Turkish candidate for any office in Oregon. So I will just say, having the experience of working in city government and managing multi-million-dollar infrastructure projects in East Portland, what I've known and learned is that one solid person in East Portland, in city government, doing that work, building that gap with community, makes a huge difference. And my point to say that is we need to do a better job of hiring people from East Portland to work in city government. And that's going to make a huge difference, because ultimately those people are going to be another liaison to different communities. And so that is critically important.
Noah.
So I think the number one thing that we do to reach out to any community is to listen, right? The East Portland has felt ignored by City Hall and by city government since they became part of a city, and probably long before that. And I work at a taxi company, and we have probably the most diverse workforce of any industry anywhere. And I work with people from all different nationalities, from people who are new immigrants to people who have multiple generations in Portland, people of every economic class. And if I can't work with each of those people, I can't succeed as a superintendent, and if we can't work together, we can't succeed as a company. And I bring that experience of working with diverse populations to achieve common goals. And a huge part of it is simply being able to listen to people, because people will tell you what they need. The people will tell you what they want from city government. And when I walk around and knock on doors to talk to people, you just have to listen.
Terrence Hayes.
So one of the reasons I ran for office is because I felt like over the last few years that a lot of people spoke for the black community that was not from the black community. So it was important to me to bring that representation, and I bring that same energy. We have to bring leaders and community members out of every community and uplift their voice. We don't need to speak for them. We don't need to determine what's important for them. We need to give them the opportunity to tell us their expectations. So I think that we have to be available. We have to be honest about the fact that we like to pick and choose in government who we want to listen to, and we need to open up the doors for communities to have their own voice and own expectations.
Steph, Routh?
I agree that with the idea of like building relationships and that those deep bridges between government and community. I absolutely agree with Candace. We need representation in government, with Timur among government staff as well. And I'm really excited about this new form of government that allows us to spend more deep time in East Portland that has been so neglected, that we have not had people come to District 1, certainly have not been from District 1, to have relationships with our diverse communities. And so I think building that muscle of constituent services within the Spanish community, within the Black community, within all of our diverse communities is really important. And I will also say, like for example, we have Representative Valderrama. I've gone to a number of open houses. Her open houses are just very different, and new people come. And I think that is indicative of our needs.
Loretta, we want to end this question with you.
Yes, what has me so excited about running for city council at this time and presently in this year is that we have a mandate to have offices in our district offices. And so we have to build relationships. I already have relationships with Coalition of Color, Latino Network, REAP, POIC, all those organizations that serve different constituencies and that serve Spanish-speaking folks. And in doing so, we have to be very intentional and deliberate, making sure that when we have these public meetings, when we have office hours, that we send them out to community-based organizations so that they know they can tell their people to come. We'll have, translation services. Folks who have a hard time hearing, we'll have that at our public meetings. So for me, I think it's about, what are you committed to? We're committed to constituent services. I worked for Senator Wyden for 20 years, and that's where I learned that you have to be on the ground and a grassroots elected official.
We have an update now. The poll we showed you at the top of this forum now. We're going to take a look at this. We asked, what do you think is the biggest issue Portland City Council should focus on? We got folks at home watching this today. Here's the response so far. Public safety, you see 60%. And homelessness at 40%. Drug crisis economy, you didn't get any votes on that, but you can see obviously public safety, homelessness big on everybody's mind. Also, we talked about our sponsor at the beginning of this program. We want to hear from them one more time. Let's play that.
I'm Steve Thorsett, president of Willamette University. We are proud to support K2's Your Voice, Your Vote election coverage. For nearly 2 centuries, Willamette's mission has been to educate leaders for civic society. We believe a healthy democracy depends on thoughtful and ethical leaders in government, and especially on an informed electorate. We're grateful for the discussions and debates K2 brings to our community. Thanks for watching.
And we'd like to thank our sponsor, Willamette University, and of course these District 1 candidates for participating in this forum. Thank you all for coming today. Starting in early October, K2 will post interviews on KATU.com with the Portland mayoral candidates and the nearly 100 Portland City Council candidates as well. Also this Thursday, 11 a.m., we'll bring you another candidate forum, this time with Portland City Council District 2 candidates. You guys just warmed them up, I'm going to tell you right now.